Hey guys, how's it going? So I wanted to make this video mainly because I keep seeing a lot, a lot of bad things in the news or negative things in the news about, that kind of revolve around Nintendo, obviously. But it seems like in the last year, we can't go a week or even 2 weeks without seeing something, some decision that Nintendo has made that garners like a lot of bad press or negativity around it. And I just kind of wanted to go over it because I know as time goes on and we get, one more new article or a piece of news or whatever about Nintendo and how people are unhappy with this new decision, or they do something that garners some bad press or whatever, and then the previous thing that they had done kind of gets pushed under the rug or whatever. People tend to forget about it over time, and a lot of companies like to take advantage of that, and that's what lawyers love to see is, they just want to give it some time, let people forget about it, just don't talk about it, it'll go away. But unfortunately, those things have not gone away. They are still there, and these are all problems that are still ongoing. They have not been resolved. They are not going to resolve them, nor do I think they ever will. So I just want to talk about some of those things. I'll kind of go over what it is that kind of started this this whole talking point for me. So this was an article that I seen, and it brought up some key points that I think I wanted to take a look at. So obviously Nintendo is acting to protect the industry with Switch 2 game key cards. Now we all know about the story about the key cards, how there's nothing actually on the physical copy of these games, and you have to instead put in, it comes with a number like on the actual game, and you put that in and you can download it from the server onto your console. Well, I know a lot of people brought up the argument that like, well, what's the point in even selling a physical copy if there's nothing on it? What is the overall point? And even then, when you get the code, it's not actually putting anything on the physical game, it's putting it all on the hard drive of the actual Switch. So it basically just makes it a useless piece of plastic, is essentially what it is. So let's kind of go over and see what is going on with it. We'll go a little more into it. So critics have said game key cards are anti-consumer, which rightfully so, and Japan's National Library has since decreed that they cannot be considered eligible for preservation, obviously, which stands to reason as the game key card contains no actual game data. Composer and former Capcom developer, we're going to call him Jim, I'm not pronouncing that, waded into the debate on Nintendo's side. He argued that physical items don't have the longevity of digital ones. Now, based off of recent events, I can say that this is probably 100% BS because, hold on. So I have here a few examples of how this can be 100% false. Okay, so bear with me for a second. I still have physical copies. This is the first two that I found that I seen on my shelf that I grabbed. But I have physical copies of old PS1, and even I still have tons of PS2 copies of games. Now, these games work perfectly fucking fine. Now, I'm not going to drag out my original consoles or anything like that because I don't want to go digging that out. But I do still have original consoles that still work perfectly fine. My games, nothing wrong with them, perfectly fine. Most of these games, some of my games are like mid 90s, okay? But I digress. My point being is that I have games that are 20s and some of them even 30 years old. Saying that physical items don't have the longevity of digital ones is, in my opinion, 100% false. How would I even be able to obtain some of these games anymore if it wasn't for physical copies? And some of these games you cannot. It's so hard to get a hold of some of these games anymore because of this. Now, let's jump, 30, 40 years down the road. Okay, so, your current, younger kids now that are playing on Switch 2s and PS5s and all this kind of stuff, jump forward 30 years. If they don't have those physical copies of those games and the only thing they ever bought was digital, eventually those servers will no longer run. They will no longer be able to have access to stuff that they played as a kid. you won't have that kind of thing. Because like anything else with digital, is that unless you have it physically stored on a device somewhere or on a separate hard drive, and you have taken good care of it, you've left, you've made sure to keep it around and you didn't delete anything, then yeah, you might still have it. But for most people, they don't keep all that stuff on one hard drive because there's no way you're going to have all that amount of storage. So you delete it, download the new game, delete it, download a new game, So therein lies a huge problem. I just want to preface all that by saying I understand that on the PC side of things, we haven't had physical copies of games for a very long time. But you have platforms like Steam that make it easier and that have stayed up for several years, or you have other alternatives like GOG or Good Old Games, where things can be saved onto a physical drive where you can keep it forever. It's like it's yours forever to keep. And with Steam, you can also, put those kind of things onto like a physical storage media and keep it that way. The main difference between that, and I know I made the argument saying that, oh, well, not everybody keeps all their games on one hard drive. Well, with a console, it's a lot harder to keep everything on one hard drive because most console users don't really have like a separate hard drive or like a individual hard drive to store games on, versus people on PC who have like this, larger storage amounts or whatever, or they have like these, like 6-7 terabytes hard drives that, they keep all their stuff on or they back everything up to. I myself, I have I believe it's a 12 terabyte external hard drive that I back pretty much all my games, other stuff like that I've kept over the years. I keep it on an external hard drive. So that's really the only key difference that I can point out. And I think another thing is like the accessibility that Steam has, and the fact that Steam is always, they have their own cloud service where everything is, all your save files are backed up and that kind of thing. But there's still issues there. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that PC is perfect by any means. It's not. There are always things that they could be doing to improve that. And, letting people, save those offline versions or be able to put them on their own physical hard drive if they want. My point being is that consoles don't really have those options, because when a newer console is released, the older one becomes obsolete. They shut down those servers for that console, and then those games just get erased into oblivion. Plain and simple. Right now, you still have physical copies for those console games, but if that were to disappear and they switch to digital only for even consoles like they do for PC, how else would you be able to get a hold of those things? That was just my little TED talk, my little rant. I just wanted to make that because it's a sore subject for me. Others would argue that digital items only last as long as they're available online, which is true. And while we've seen many quite recent games removed from circulation by publishers, we know what the example is, which shoots a hole in Jim's debate somewhat. However, he has a point. If digital games were made available forever, then they would certainly outlast physical games, which can be subject to wear and tear. Now, I will concede on that point. If there was a way to make digital games available forever, and there was better game preservation or preservation laws, then obviously the need for physical copies wouldn't be as prevalent. He also claims that Nintendo's game key cards are also a measure against illegal copying. I'll wait till the end to touch on that one. As the data cannot be extracted from the cartridge and distributed online, it can still be extracted from the storage of the console it is downloaded to, of course. So again, you're saying that you're using these game key cards to fight illegal piracy or, pirating of the games, but if you can still get the data off of console because it's not saved on the it's not saved on the card, it's saved on the console, you're literally taking a step forward and then taking 2 steps back. You're not really achieving anything. You're giving it the illusion of a sign of progress or a way to fight back against piracy when you're really not. It also reduces the risk of Nintendo and other publishers holding excess inventory and potentially losing revenue, as game key cards are far cheaper to manufacture. And there is the underlying reasoning why they're trying to do this, because they don't want to pay the distribution and the manufacturing of all these games. It costs more money to make physical copies that just sit on a shelf waiting for somebody to buy it versus digital copies that require almost no money to produce, when all you got to do is hit a switch and boom, there it is. That's what their argument really is. Nintendo is just trying to penny pinch every bit of money that they can possibly make, and they're trying to alleviate some of the costs that are associated with game production. I feel that these moves are largely aimed at protecting the gaming industry and the digital entertainment industry. Again, their interests are not with you, not with their customers, not with making a good product. It's with the companies. It's with the industry as a whole, digital entertainment industry as a whole. They want a way to say, hey, look what we can do. Now you can do it, because people are still buying our product, even though kind of giving them a kick in the nuts. It might be a bit too optimistic of a view, but the fact is that because Nintendo takes the lead, other companies can more easily follow suit and protect themselves. Again, Nintendo knows that usually whenever they set a trend, a lot of other companies or, people within the gaming space tend to follow suit. Just like with the $80 price tag, Nintendo kind of set it. You've seen a bunch of other companies start jumping on that bandwagon. When the Wii first came out and there was the motion control stuff, what did PlayStation do? PlayStation jumped on it, and they had I think it was the PlayStation Move, I think it was called. And all of a sudden now PlayStation has their own motion control things. Nintendo has a reputation of setting a trend and then other companies will follow suit. That is not up for debate. It's always been a thing. So the fact that Nintendo knows this, their ego is in the right place, because they know exactly if they do something, other companies will follow suit. Greed is often cited as one of the main reasons for the Game Keycards initiative, but Jim disagrees on this point. Greed is the reason why. They want more money. They've always wanted more money. They want to protect what's theirs. They don't want competition, as we'll get into. Do you think a company that's already made that much profit would do this just to make even more money? Even if they stop selling anything right now, they have enough cash reserves to support all their current employees until retirement. It's so incredible, it's almost ridiculous. And therein lies the point. When a company gets to be as big as Nintendo, PlayStation, Microsoft, whatever, these companies don't just stop trying to make money, okay? They don't sit there and say, oh, well, we got all this money, we don't really need to do this. No. If you have made that much money and you are that big of a company, you're not stopping there. You're not going to stop at the $500 billion revenue mark. No, you're going to say, oh, well, we can make 500 billion. So let's go ahead and shoot for $1 trillion. Let's shoot for 2 trillion. Let's shoot for a go bajillion, whatever. They're not stopping. There is no point to where they say, hey, this is the cap and this is where we'll stop doing things. This is where we stop right here. It's always about the money. That's what the whole point of a business is to make money. The more money you make, the happier you are. So this is the main article that kind of sparked my conversation with this. Now, seeing this, I kind of thought back and looked at some of the other stuff that, Nintendo has been kind of pushing really hard lately. And now all the articles, everything I'm going to go over, keep in mind that it's only been in the past year. This is for not even a full 12-month cycle. This is just 2025. This is just within this year. This year's not even over with. And then we look back at the Pokemon Power World thing. They sued Power World because they saw Power World as a threat to Pokemon because it got so popular. They tried putting out these patents about using a ball to summon little creatures or whatever. And then the patent about gliding on a creature that you summon from a ball and things like that. And it's this kind of stuff that shows Nintendo is afraid of any competition. They can't handle any form of competition, because if there's competition, that means there's somebody else out there that's putting out something better than what you've done for the last 20, 30 years. And you're afraid of that. So what better way to deal with it than to sue it into oblivion and to make sure it can't get back up. Now they've pushed another patent that basically is so broad of a patent and so vague that it's sparked a lot of debate amongst people. And there's even some other like lawyers within the gaming space. So opinions of a video game IP lawyer, Kirk Sigmund, who called Nintendo's latest patents an embarrassing failure of the US patent system. Other legal experts are now echoing his skepticism, including the Pokemon Company's own former head lawyer. The patent in question uses legally specific language in its claims, which define in rigorous legalese the mechanics of the Let's Go auto battle features of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. That's fine. It's something, you might have made, you want to file a patent for it, yada, yada, yada. Company Chief Legal Officer Don McGowan told Eurogamer that he isn't convinced the patent would hold up to scrutiny in a lawsuit due to its similarities to existing art. So, in other words, it wouldn't really hold up because there's too many other things similar to it, so you made a patent that is so broad and vague that it can be used basically against you, but yet it was allowed to go through. Last time I checked, a patent is for something unique and, something fresh, new idea, versus something as vague as something that just says you summoned a creature, now it's fighting for you. That is owned by Nintendo and the Pokemon Company. I can think of many games over the years where you have summoned some sort of creature that fights alongside you. So, games industry lawyer Richard Hogue told Eurogamer that patents like Nintendo's can stifle competition simply by existing. And that's exactly the point of such patents and lawsuits, is that they don't want the competition. They don't want the competition because they're afraid of it. Because they know that sometimes things come out and there are iterations on things that are better by a landslide than the original, and that's what they're afraid of. The filing for such patent protection indicates that Nintendo does intend to pursue a legal strategy in defending itself against entrants in the pocket monster genre, but the strategy may or may not involve lawsuits, as the muddying of the waters affected by the patent's existence may be enough to deter investment in and creation of competitors. That is, if Nintendo looks like it could pounce, that may be enough. No actual pouncing required. So what he's saying is that by them putting out these patents, basically it's fear mongering. Like, they're just trying to instill fear in anybody that wants to create anything like Pokemon at all. And if they can at least instill fear, they don't actually need to do these lawsuits. They don't need to pounce on them with legal action. They can just scare them into oblivion with the threat of it. That's all they need. He also said that Nintendo's latest patent approvals could be an indicator that U.S. patent authorities are struggling to fully grasp how intellectual property decisions could influence the dynamics of the game industry. Law and technology are often strange bedfellows, and in my opinion, the Patent Office has appeared out of its depth of evaluating video games for quite some time. It may be time for reform there, and I agree. And I think a lot of people agree that IP law needs to be updated. It needs reform. There needs to be changes with IP laws because these companies are taking crazy advantage, especially nowadays. People love to take advantage of IP laws and try to shut people down left, right, and center just because they want their IP to be the only one of its kind. They don't want more Pokemons, more Vampire Survivors, more... I personally, and I think a lot of people share this sentiment, I don't think that video game mechanics, subgenre of games, should be something that is able to be patented. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. We'll go ahead and move on to the next point of contention. Nintendo hasn't kept just a lot of their scrutiny to lawsuits and legal action and stuff like that. Nintendo has also now shown more of this overreach with IP protection when it comes to charity speedrun events, where a little while back we had a Japanese speedrunning event that was contacted by Nintendo a month before the event, told them that, hey, you don't have permission to be speedrunning our games at a live event. Until you get the approval from us, you can't show those games at your speedrunning event. Now, I know I did a quick little video a while back when that first happened, basically saying that, they're not going to stop with just this one speedrunning event. They're probably going to start targeting more of them. I would not be shocked if Games Done Quick and the European speedrun events also get targeting for this kind of thing and have to start getting approval for any and all Nintendo games. But I also think these other speedrunning events that do emulated Nintendo games, or they do ROM hack kind of games with Nintendo games, and Games Done Quick has a very long history of ROM hack type speedruns with things like randomizers and, you know, the like the Kaizo kind of runs for like Metroid and Mario and stuff like that. I think that it's going to come to a point where you're probably going to see less and less Nintendo related stuff in speedruns. Possibly. Now, maybe they work out some kind of deal with Nintendo and do something like that, but I don't see that happening. There is clearly an overreach with IP law. Now, not just with IP law, but with other things, Nintendo shows no give a shit. As we all know, they raised their prices to $80, and that sparked a lot of debate with people. And to be fair, I don't really think any Switch 2 first-party game or first-party Nintendo game should be $80. I don't think it's worth $80, especially when your breakout $80 game is a Mario Kart game. It's literally racing around with Mario, Bowser, Peach, and Luigi on basically rehashed copies of the same tracks that you've had since Super Nintendo. Now, another point of contention, though, has been the fact that Nintendo still has not solved the Joy-Con drift or stick drift problems. Still is an issue on the Switch 2. Now, I haven't heard anything since the console has released. I do know that it was an issue when it did come out. I've noticed that there are varying degrees of how bad it can be. I've heard some people say that it happens within a week of their having their Switch 2. I've seen other people say that I still don't have the issue. So there's this like very broad like swing of the pendulum when it comes to who gets it, how often they get it, how quickly they get it, and how bad it really is. But the fact that it's still an issue, it was an issue all through the first Switch's life cycle, and it's still a problem that did not get addressed. So they've shown that they don't care about this because this is extra resources they have to put into it. It's extra money they have to put into it, and they don't want to fix this because people are still buying the crap. People are still going out and spending money on Nintendo's nonsense and their garbage and their way overpriced accessories and everything else like that. And trust me, when I say that you should not have to pay $120, which is at this point $120 just for the dock to be able to connect it to your TV, $120. That is a third of the fucking console itself. A third. The controllers, Joy-Cons themselves, just the Joy-Cons, not this little centerpiece, just the Joy-Cons, $100, sometimes more. How is it that a controller or this little dock, just to plug it in, just to connect it to your TV, is costing you a third of the original, of the actual console price? It is baffling to me how they can charge so much. And then the last thing is their price hike on the older generation. So Switch 2 has been released, and now they claim that they have to raise the price on the original Switch because of tariffs. Now, I know a lot of companies right now are using the tariffs as an excuse to raise prices on everything. That's a different topic. To do it on an older previous generation console and not your current one is where things get very shady. So even right here, pretty much every major console has received numerous price cuts throughout its life cycle, usually indicating slower demand, improved manufacturing processes, and a desire to increase sales, which is true. Because if you look here, Nintendo Switch 2017 to 2025. So back in 2017, things weren't as streamlined, as far as manufacturing, and, the demand was a lot higher back then. There are many factors that kind of go into this. But in the next 8 years, you somehow haven't found a way to improve the hardware to make it to where you're not spending as much money on, like, say, chipsets or whatever. This is essentially just pushing a product. And as someone that is in management, I know exactly what they're doing, and it still pisses me off. There are reasons why Nintendo has had to so wholeheartedly fight back against emulation especially with the Switch, with the Switch emulation being such a huge deal. There's a reason why they have to fight back against this kind of thing. It's because people don't want to support Nintendo, or they can't afford to support Nintendo. They can't afford to buy products to this company. So again, they're going to pirate these games. And yes, there are Switch emulators, and they went after one already, the Yuzu emulator. Let's just say I know very much what Yuzu was. I know what it was capable of, And I will say the fact that they were asking for donations was their downfall because they were trying to profit off of it. Now, do I think that emulation is bad? Like, is there like really like this black and white kind of look to it? No. But moving on, we look at games or other companies like PlayStation, Xbox, all them. Yes, they're doing price hikes as well, but they didn't do it with the older generation of hardware. They did it with the current generation. And yes, again, they did cite the tariffs as one of their main reasons for it. But I think that that is a much more, I don't really want to say acceptable, but understanding for raising a price on on hardware when it's the current generation, not the older generation. Because even going off of like, this article, it clearly states that, even just with Nintendo, they have never raised the price outside of that console's life cycle. Like even at the end of its life cycle, the price was still lower than what it was originally when it first launched. And it's the same thing down the line. Sony did the same thing. Xbox has done the same thing. All of these years that's ever existed, by the time it reaches the end of that console's life cycle, price has always been lower than what it was at launch. This is just a hard forcing people to buy into the Switch 2 because it has the extra security stuff. One other thing that I did want to touch on, I don't really have any articles pulled up for it. I tried finding, there was a couple of them, but they weren't very good articles and they didn't really like kind of go into it. They was just like side notes for it. So there were also talks of some third-party accessories that don't work with Switch 2 because the console itself does like basically like a check for a certain type of encryption or type of looking for a certain like connection type, and if it doesn't meet the certain connection type that Nintendo is looking for, it just won't work on the console. And the same thing with like some of the USB ports. People were saying, there were people talking about how they were trying to use a different charger for their Switch because they weren't at home and they didn't have the charger that it came with, and so but did it wouldn't charge their console, or if it did, it didn't do as good of a job, or if it was like over the voltage, or there's for whatever reason it's not viable to use a different charger than what it actually comes with. And that some of the docks that were third-party docks, where they weren't as bulky, people wanted ones that were a little bit smaller or more personalized, and so but those weren't working at all. Like the Switch just wouldn't even register it as a dock, and so they weren't working at all. And it just shows that it boils down to Nintendo only wants you to buy Nintendo products. They don't want another company coming in and trying to sell you a third-party accessory or third-party anything really, because Nintendo wants to have a monopoly on that source of income, and they want to make sure you're only buying their products, so you're only giving them the money. And it's become a huge problem. I personally feel that Nintendo has shown a abhorrent amount of greed, and just there's no real like repercussions for anything that they do. I just wanted to kind of like go over some of this stuff because I've seen a lot of news about Nintendo, like especially within the last few months, but these were all just things that I've managed to find that were from within the last year alone. And all of this just kind of paints a picture that like Nintendo is like steadily over time showing more and more overreach as far as what a company can and cannot do, especially when it comes to IP law and protecting what's theirs, corporate greed, all of it. A lot of people have bought into the nostalgia, and that's what a lot of people look at Nintendo for, because they grew up playing Nintendo games. I did as well. I played Super Nintendo, GameCube, N64, all that kind of stuff. Yes, I grew up with that, but I can also look past the nostalgia goggles and see when something needs to be scrutinized. I deeply think that IP law does need to be reevaluated, and there needs to be more regulations with IP law. And I think especially when it comes to patents inside of the video game space, there needs to be more laws in place as to what you can and cannot patent, if it's even something that can be patented. If it is something that is truly unique and that it's worth protecting from other people stealing. My opinion on like video game related patents, you can't patent something, or I don't think you should be allowed to patent something that could be used as iteration if that makes any sense. Now, I know pretty much everything is an iteration of something else, but I think patenting game mechanics, especially since it's like a entertainment industry kind of thing, and I think another good example would be, you know, somebody trying to patent like the whole like horror movie kind of cliche where the white girl that has sex in a horror movie is always the one to die. What if somebody tried to patent that, and then this movie producer is the only one that's allowed to make those kind of horror movies? The video game industry has so many things that would not fly in any other industry. It's just ridiculous. And it's kind of sad to see this kind of stuff happen. And because, you know, video games are something I'm very passionate about, what I made my channel about. It just really, like, it rubs me the wrong way. I'll go ahead and end my rant there. But you know, I just wanted to bring some attention to this and just kind of go over everything that I've seen. So if you like the video, don't forget to give me a like, sub, you know, leave a comment. I like to read your guys' comments. I do read all the comments. I also do stream over on Kick. I don't really have like a set schedule or anything, but I do post all my going lives on Twitter. So go ahead and follow me there if you want, for all those kind of notifications. And if you want to help support the channel, you can donate to my Ko-Fi page. I'll leave the link down in the description below. Any and all donations are greatly appreciated. Definitely not mandatory though. That's all I got this time. So have a good one and peace.